Thus the challenge that'll shape our world. A seemingly unstoppable rising China, accelerating towards an apparently immovable ruling U.S., on course for what could be the grandest collision in history. To help us get our minds around this challenge, I'm going to introduce you to a great thinker. I'm going to present a big idea, and I'm going to pose a most consequential question. So the great thinker is Thucydides. Now, I know his name is a mouthful, and some people have trouble pronouncing it. So let's do it 1, 2, 3 together. Thucydides. One more time. Thucydides. So who was Thucydides? He was the father and founder of history. He wrote the first ever history book. It's titled The History of the Peloponnesian War, about the war in Greece 2,500 years ago. So if nothing else today, you can tweet to your friends, I met a great thinker, and I can even pronounce his name, Thucydides. Okay. So about this war between that destroyed classical Greece, Thucydides wrote famously, it was the rise of Athens and the fear that this instilled in Sparta that made the war inevitable. So the rise of one, the reaction of the other, create a toxic cocktail of pride, arrogance, paranoia that drug them both to war. Which brings me to the big idea, Thucydides' trap. Thucydides' trap is a term I coined several years ago to make vivid Thucydides' insight. Thucydides' trap is the dangerous dynamic that occurs when a rising power threatens to displace a ruling power, like Athens, or Germany 100 years ago, or China today, and their impact on Sparta, or Great Britain 100 years ago, or the US today. As Henry Kissinger has said, once you get this idea, this concept of Thucydides' trap in your head, it'll provide a lens for helping you look through the news and noise of the day to understand what's actually going on. So, to the most consequential question about our world today. Are we going to follow in the footsteps of history? Or can we, through a combination of imagination and common sense and courage, find a way for to manage this rivalry without a war nobody wants and everybody knows would be catastrophic? Give me 5 minutes to unpack this, and that later this afternoon when the next news story pops up for you about China doing this or the US reacting like that, you'll be able to have a better understanding of what's going on and even to explain it to your friends. So, as we saw with this flipping the pyramid of poverty, China has actually soared. It's meteoric. Former Czech President Václav Havel, I think, put it best. He said, all this has happened so fast, we haven't yet had time to be astonished. Okay. To remind myself how astonished I should be, I occasionally look out the window in my office in Cambridge at this bridge which goes across the Charles River between the Kennedy School and Harvard Business School. In 2012, the state of Massachusetts said they were going to renovate this bridge. It would take 2 years. In 2014, they said it wasn't finished. In 2015, they said it would take 1 more year. In 2015, they said it's not finished. We're not going to tell you when it's going to be finished. Finally, last year, it was finished 3 times over budget. Now, compare this to a similar bridge that I drove across last month in Beijing. It's called the Shenyang Bridge. In 2015, the Chinese decided they wanted to renovate that bridge. It actually has twice as many lanes of traffic. How long did it take for them to complete the project? 2015. What do you bet? Take a guess. Okay. Take a look. The answer is 43 hours. Now, of course, that couldn't happen in New York, yes. Okay. Behind this speed and execution is a purpose-driven leader and a government that works. The most ambitious and most competent leader on the international stage today is China's President Xi Jinping. And he's made no secret about what he wants. As he said when he became president 6 years ago, his goal is to make China great again. A banner he raised long before Donald Trump picked up a version of this. Okay. To that end, Xi Jinping has announced specific targets for specific dates: 2025, 2035, 2049. By 2025, China means to be the dominant power in the major market in 10 leading technologies, including driverless cars, robots, artificial intelligence, quantum computing. By 2035, China means to be the innovation leader across all the advanced technologies. And by 2049, which is the 100th anniversary of the founding of the People's Republic, China means to be unambiguously number one, including, as Xi Jinping, an army that he calls, quote, fight and win. So these are audacious goals, but as you can see, China is already well on its way to these objectives. And we should remember how fast our world is changing. 30 years ago, the World Wide Web had not yet even been invented. Who will feel the impact of this rise of China most directly? Obviously, the current number one. As China gets bigger and stronger and richer, technologically more advanced, it'll inevitably bump up against American positions and prerogatives. Now, for red-blooded Americans, and especially for red-necked Americans like me, I'm from North Carolina, there's something wrong with this picture. Okay? The USA means number one. That's who we are. But again, to repeat, brute facts are hard to ignore. 4 years ago, Senator John McCain asked me to testify about this to his Senate Senate Armed Services Committee. And so I made for them a chart that you can see that said, compare the US and China to kids on opposite ends of a seesaw on a playground, each represented by the size of their economy. As late as 2004, China was just half our size. By 2014, its GDP was equal to ours. And on the current trajectory, by 2024, it'll be half again larger. The consequences of this tectonic change will be felt everywhere. For example, in the current trade conflict, China is already the number one trading partner of all the major Asian countries. Which brings us back to our Greek historian. Harvard's Thucydides trap case file has reviewed the last 500 years of history and found 16 cases in which a rising power threatened to displace a ruling power. 12 of these ended in war. And the tragedy of this is that in very few of these did either of the protagonists want a war. Few of these wars were initiated by either the rising power or the ruling power. So how does this work? What happens is a third party's provocation forces one or the other to react, and that sets in motion a spiral which drags the two somewhere they don't want to go. If that seems crazy, it is, but it's life. Remember World War I. The provocation in that case was the assassination of a second-level figure, Archduke Franz Ferdinand, which then led the Austro-Hungarian emperor to issue an ultimatum to Serbia. They dragged in the various allies. Within 2 months, all of Europe was at war. So imagine Thucydides were watching Planet Earth today. What would he say? Could he find a more appropriate leading man for the ruling power than Donald J. Trump? Or a more apt lead for the rising power than Xi Jinping? And he would scratch his head and certainly say he couldn't think of a more colorful provocateur than North Korea's Kim Jong-un. Each seems determined to play his assigned part and is right on script.